We are going forward. The march towards freedom and justice is irreversible.
The man who would be president. He traipsed the world stage, courting support and money for the new South Africa yet to be born. Madiba had the meek and mighty eating out of his hands. Former Reserve Bank Governor Tito Mboweni accompanied him on that trip. He recalls how Mandela's interactions with leaders from China and Vietnam convinced him that nationalization was not an option. What impact did that have on South Africa's future economic policy?
That was very revealing, in fact, because both of them asked him a question. Why are you talking about nationalization when we leaders of communist parties are talking about privatization and attracting the private sector into our economies? And I think the old man reflected on that quite heavily and seriously. For him personally, that was a very important experience.
Mandela described apartheid South Africa as a country of extremes. The rich were spectacularly wealthy, while the poor were devastatingly so. 22 years later, that remains the case despite programs which have pulled millions out of poverty. Which begs the question, did South Africa make the right policy choices?
Will you please raise your right hand and say, "So help me God"?
So help me God.
Well, I lived in countries which had nationalization, and there was no progress there. So nationalization doesn't mean success. In fact, in some of those countries, nationalization meant the enrichment of a few elites and the impoverishment of many. Nationalization is a misguided philosophy, if I might say so. It sounds revolutionary, but actually it's very retrogressive. So I think that the focus must be somewhere else. How do we continue to improve the lives of the people? How do we bridge the gap between the wealthy and the poor?
But not everyone's convinced the government made the right choice. Some of South Africa's born-frees think nationalization has some appeal.
If we have the banks in South Africa nationalized and the mines, then the profits that come from those companies and the mines will help boost our country.
It will create jobs, first of all, but there is always the danger of a government-controlled society, which I don't think is a good solution to the problems. But I think, to an extent, it will definitely help.
In other countries, maybe, but because of the corruption in this country, I don't feel confident enough in the government to really feel that it would, help our economy at all.
With any proposal, there first needs to be a structured plan, and nationalisation could work, but I do think that there needs to be numerous independent authorities that can monitor how this nationalisation is implemented.
Certain sector within the government right now in terms of nationalisation can work, but then obviously will depend on quite a lot of factors that the government needs to start looking into. Like when you can't talk about nationalisation and you don't talk about skill development and capacity building, which are areas that the government actually need to invest into, and then we can move forward with that.
Nelson Mandela returns to Davos in 2014, but this time on the big screen. Filmmaker Anand Singh has told Madiba's story in the blockbuster film Long Walk to Freedom.
My lord, it is not I but the government that should plead guilty. Freedom, it is an ideal for which I am prepared to die.
The World Economic Forum will host a special screening on Friday. And those who watched Madiba's debut 22 years ago have no doubt he'll steal the show once again.
Somebody want me.
Well, tell us something special or unique that happened at that time.
In fact, maybe I must reveal the secret. In fact, people were less interested in him talking about the economy. They were more interested in him talking about his experiences on Robben Island, his political outlook, what he thought he might do to encourage South Africans to reconcile with one another. They were really interested in Nelson Mandela, the man, the leader, the humanist, the freedom fighter. He presented himself as an African global statesman. He was the captain of his ship and the master of his destiny.